They say that teamwork makes the dream work, and that's the theme of today's jam-packed episode of the Paperback Warrior podcast.
Welcome to the 86th episode of the Paperback Warrior podcast. I'm as tickled as a pig in slop to be back here with my broadcast partner, Tom. The Paperback Warrior podcast is an outgrowth of our wildly popular blog at paperbackwarrior.com. We specialize in reviewing mid-20th century paperback fiction in the spy, crime noir, western, action-adventure, science fiction, horror, and military genres. If Tom has his way, we're going to be doing nurse fiction soon.
Don't put that on me.
Basically, those old books with awesome painted covers that just demand to be opened and read. We do that every single day with new reviews on our blog and this very show each week. Tom, would you say you and I make a perfect writing team?
Without question. We are the Woodward and Bernstein of vintage paperback investigative journalism.
I like that. Do we make a good broadcast team?
Yes, because we know our roles. You are the tech junkie who keeps everything edited and smoothly and does all the pesky legwork, keeping the reels rolling. And I remain the charming and charismatic, dashingly handsome paperback warrior who's the in-house subject matter expert regarding all things vintage fiction. I am the brains, and you are the wiring. I am the sizzle, you're the steak.
Well, okay, part of that's true, honestly. The part's about me being a tech guy. But you totally nailed it. You and I make a good team because we each have a skill set that contributes to the greater good. Because of our individual talents, we make Paperback Warrior the internet's finest resource for all things vintage fiction. But based on that idea, why don't you tell the listeners what we've got planned for this special episode of the show?
All right, so today we're going to be discussing teams in action-adventure fiction. Remember all those series titles of the 70s, 80s, and 90s featuring bullet-belted heroic teams? We are going to delve deep into that subgenre of literature, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and we're going to talk about the origin of team-ups, as well as a comprehensive analysis of key series titles from the late 20th century. In the best interest of time, we're going to refrain from offering individual book reviews at the end like we normally do, so we can really concentrate on this mammoth story behind team-based action-adventure. Trust me, it is going to be worth the sacrifice this week. You are going to love this episode, guys.
I'm really jacked up to talk about it, and I know we got a lot of requests on our social media avenues as well as comments and emails asking for more action-adventure-oriented reviews and features, so hopefully this will satisfy your cravings for these types of books. But before we get into all of that, you have some news to talk about, acquisitions, I'm assuming.
Yes, there's only one that I really need to talk about this week, but I think it's significant. At some point, I should probably put together a special on this guy because we're accumulating a lot of titles by him in our library of vintage fiction reviews. His name is James McKimmey, and he lived from 1923 to 2011. A lot of his crime fiction was in Dell paperbacks. And on our site, we've reviewed The Perfect Victim, Winner Take All, and The Long Ride. Of those three books, I think The Long Ride is really James McKimmey's masterpiece. It's without exception one of the best books I've read since I started at Paperback Warrior. Now, later this month, on April 26th to be exact, Stark House is putting out a trade paperback with two McKimmey books packaged together. And these books this one's important because these books that they're reprinting are hard as hell to find. The release pairs the novel Run If You're Guilty with a short story collection called Never Be Caught. Now, Run If You're Guilty was a 1963 novel that I don't believe ever had a mass market paperback release. I think it only came out as a Boardman book hardcover. It's about a guy named Joe who runs a tourist cabin resort in California that's about to close down for the winter. So there's just a few guests at the resort, and one of them is brutally murdered. It becomes this edgy whodunit from there. The plot description seems kind of blah, but I have total faith that it's good because McKimmy was so good. Then this novel was actually expanded from a short story called Death Trap that originally appeared in the June 1962 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine, back when that was a general interest magazine with lots of fiction. We all know that the magazine later became a popular women's magazine that can help ladies unlock their orgasmic potential.
Oh.
Yeah, a skill I personally conquered at age 14. Anyway, the novel is Run If You're Guilty by James McKimmy. But wait, there's more. The same volume that Stark House is putting out in a couple weeks has another lost McKimmy book. This one's called Never Be Caught, and it's a collection of 3 50-page novellas that were released together as one volume, but only got a European release. I see it as a hardcover from Boardman Books also. The 3 novellas are called Never Be Caught, and Then She Was Dead, and Kill Him Again. I know the last 2 books originally appeared in Cosmopolitan in 1962 and 1963. I got to tell you, lately, a 50-page novella sounds like the perfect length for me these days. So I'm going to definitely dip into this Stark House collection. Once again, the book is called Run If You're Guilty and Never Be Caught. Author is James McKimmy. Book's available from Stark House on April 26th, and you can pre-order it now. Eric, I have seen your show outline for this episode, and you have so much planned. I feel like this is going to be the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League if I continue to blather on. The listener may want to pause the show and grab a pen and pad, all kidding aside, because there's a lot of men's adventure recommendations coming your way, and you may want to jot down the titles that sound good to you for your next shopping trip. So do your thing, man.
Today's feature is on team-based combat in men's action-adventure titles. And I know it seems like a fairly vague concept, but the real catalyst behind today's feature was the 1980s and 1990s titles like Phoenix Force or, Alpha Team, SOBs, and, other series names that seems to saturate the used bookstores these days. The idea behind the feature is to go back and look at the early history of teams and how it evolved into the late 20th century's explosion of these team commando books. Tom and I will also be spending some time talking about specific series titles, their history, and our personal experiences with them. So without further ado, let's oil up our chest and arms, strap on a bullet belt, and talk about team combat.
Done and done.
Yes. So personally, I grew up with films like The Wild Geese, Attack Force Z, and The Dirty Dozen, playing on cable television in the 1980s. And these were all military-styled action flicks that typically featured a squad or a team of combatants that were globally attempting to perform a mission or meet a goal. The team ideology is that each member possesses a certain skill set or a talent that aids the team to achieve success. People love these team scenarios, and they were dominant on the big and small screen. Along with the ones we mentioned, there was also The Magnificent Seven, a classic Western made up of an all-star cast, and was inspired by a Japanese samurai film called Seven Samurai. If you were a boy in the 80s, you probably knew the A-Team, a band of ex-military guys that travel the country in a van, solving crimes and fighting bad guys.
I was obsessed with them when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was great. I had the van, the toy.
Nice.
For me, every afternoon after school, I was watching cartoons like G.I. Joe and Mask, which emphasized a team-based system of heroes that were selected for certain missions in each episode. Of course, there are also comics like The Avengers, Justice League, X-Men, Fantastic Four that were all smoking red hot in the 70s and 80s on store shelves. And looking at the books I've read, talked about, and reviewed here on the blog and talked about on the show, the earliest team-based novels I could find were the Doc Savage titles. The very first Doc Savage story, Man of Bronze, was printed by Street and Smith in 1933 and written by a guy named Lester Dent. In it, there's the central hero of Doc Savage, a fairly invincible guy that excels at everything. Essentially, he's the perfect man. But in that book, readers are introduced to his team. Doc Savage's team consisted of Ham, Monk, Rennie, Long Tom, and Johnny. Each of these team members has a specialty that ranges from archaeology to engineering to chemistry and so forth. That concept, again used in 1933, was repeated over and over and over for 10 decades. I mean, it's still being used today. You've got team-based heroes all over the place that are made up of specialists. I'm sure there were one or two titles that came before Doc Savage's 1933 origin, but for me personally, that's the earliest one I've had any experience with. A year later, more pulps would start using this formula. Stuff like The Secret Six and The Suicide Squad. Not the DC comic, but the serial stories featured in Ace G-Man. Like Doc Savage, 1939's The Avenger would eventually evolve into more of a team-based pulp series, with the main hero being accompanied by various teammates that specialized in certain skills. You could just rinse and repeat for 1939's The Black Bat, and again in 1940 with The Masked Detective. In the 1940s through, let's say the 1960s, the Private Eye novels would always feature the hero teaming up with guys like attorneys or police chiefs to solve the murder. The same thing happened with pulps like The Dean and Green Llama. I don't consider these as teams, and I want to make that really clear. There's a difference between teams and just pair-ups or heroes with allies. For my definition, teams have a minimum of 3 members and each have a certain skill set that contributes to the team's objective.
That sounds right. I agree with that. I don't think anyone would consider Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin to be a crime-fighting team. It's really just like a dude and his sidekick. So I like your definition of a team of needing at least 3 people with specialties.
Good. Well, for comic books, the first real official team I could locate was Justice Society of America. It was introduced in All-Star Comics number 3 in 1940, and is the predecessor to what we all know now as Justice League of America, featuring Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and so forth. This early version, again called Justice Society of America, had heroes like Dr. Fate, Hourman, Sandman, the Spectre, and so on. This kickstarted the whole team idea in comics that would later just dominate the entire industry. I'm going to fast forward now to the more gritty action-adventure fiction of the late 60s. I think the one novel that exemplifies this harder, more intense team-based combat is the second Executioner novel called Death Squad by Don Pendleton. This was originally published in 1969 by Pinnacle. In it, Mac Bolan recruits a team to assist him in the fight with the West Coast Mafia. And this team is made up of the guys that worked exclusively with Bolan in the Vietnam War. Guys like Zitka, Harrington, Hoffauer, and Fontanelli were all among the group. This Death Squad is later featured in Stephen Mertz's Super Bolan novel Dirty War, which is phenomenal, as sort of a retcon showing the group in battle with Bolan in Vietnam. But Tom, this 1969 Executioner novel, again called Death Squad, to me is the first of the really gritty and violent men's action-adventure team-based ideas that would eventually turn into full-on series titles by a number of publishers in the 70s and 80s.
I know I beat this drum a lot, but the advent of paperback original novels in 1949 really ratcheted up both the sex and the violence in books, and every subsequent decade thereafter has seen more violent plotting. Successful solo hero titles, like you mentioned, really kind of begat the teams of heroes in paperback, vigilante, and military fiction. And it seems that the public really liked the idea of having an ensemble cast of heroes. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, I think so, and it gives them a lot of variety to choose their favorite, right? I mean, they've got a lot of selection.
Definitely.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to highlight a few of these titles and just tell you a little bit about my experience with them. I'm also going to hand the books to Tom, so he can tell you the marketing tag on the covers. So we're going to start with this one. So we've covered author Dan Strebe a few times on the show and rarely have anything nice to say about his work. In fact, Lyle Kenyon Ingle of Book Creations, Inc., which is a publishing giant we talked about a few weeks ago, he once claimed that Strebe was, quote, not very good. And that's saying a lot considering Strebe wrote for him. Nevertheless, Dan Strebe wrote a couple of series titles featuring teams. The first was a 2-book series called Death Squad, published by Belmont Tower under the name Frank Coulter in 1975. I read and reviewed the first one, which is called Gang War, and it's got a great cover.
And the tagline says, 3 tough cops on a personal vendetta against criminals the law can't touch.
In this one, 3 cops in San Diego take sick leave from work and take out their own form of justice on a trio of rapists. It's fairly violent, sort of in the way that Super Cop Joe Blaze was, or maybe the Riker series. There's genitalia shot off and limbs coming loose from explosions. There's even a firefight in the San Diego Zoo. It's not a terrible book, but nothing anyone immediately needs. The second team-based action novel that Strebe wrote was a 4-book title called Kill Squad. Now, there are 2 Kill Squad series, but this is the 1970s one, not the 1990s series that Dan Schmidt wrote. I'm going to cover that one later. This Kill Squad debuted in 1975 on Manor and was written by Strebe using the name Mark Cruz. I've never read the series, but I hear it's average at best.
First, in a bone-crunching new series, they were judge, jury, and executioners, exterminating the degenerate vermin the law couldn't touch.
In the first Kill Squad novel, which is an origin story, 4 cops go off duty to try to fight some bikers that are raping and pillaging San Diego. In a way, this is almost interchangeable from Strebe's Death Squad series, only it adds a female cop named Alvarez. I'm almost sure that Strebe had all of it blended together and then just fragmented it off once he discovered he had enough nonsense here to orchestrate 2 series titles instead of 1. The premise is set in San Diego, and the idea is cops being off-duty, fighting crime with more violent and deadly means. Next, in 1976, a British publisher called Everest released a standalone book called The Crime Commandos. It was written by author Peter Cave. Tom, what's the cover say?
They took the roughest, toughest coppers on the force and threw away the rule book.
I love it. The novel features the premise that an urban guerrilla force is formed in London that features, again, 4 police officers that are given free rein to dispose of criminals in terrorist cells. The team even adds a 5th member, which, get this, it's a bomb-sniffing dog.
Everybody loves dogs in their books.
Why not add it to a team? The book even has the team names on the back and what their skills are. It was just the one novel, and I really liked it, but I think the idea was to make it an entire series, but it just didn't work out. Again, this is The Crime Commandos by Peter Cave. Next, British author John Harvey authored a 5-book series called The Mercenaries under the pseudonym John Hart. John is Jon, Hart, H-A-R-T. The debut was published in 1977 by Mayflower.
Killer Commando for hire.
With The Mercenaries, the idea was an action-adventure series starring criminals, get that, starring criminals, that are led by a cunning negotiator named Major Kane. I really hated the debut, which is a book called Black Blood, and I felt it was just clunky and unnecessarily gory. I hated this book so much that, Tom, it made it into our infamous Hall of Shame category on the blog.
That's saying a lot.
It is. Again, this was The Mercenaries with a debut novel called Black Blood. Speaking of Hall of Shame, another turd made it in as well. This series is called SCOM.
Oh, God, I remember this one.
It stands for Strategic Commandos. It was published by Warner, which is a first sign that it's garbage, and ran 6 total installments. It was authored by Robert McGarvey under the name Steve White. The debut, Terror in Turin, was published in 1981. The cover is extraordinary, isn't it?
These covers are always great when they feature hot women in bondage and men holding large-capacity machine guns. In the bottom corner of this one, it says, "The most notorious brand of military mercenaries the world has ever known."
Overall, this one is unbelievably awful. It features a 5-member team that's formed by a man called Stone Williams. The team features a martial arts African-American, an Israeli acrobatic, a Cuban defector who blows stuff up, and the proverbial strongman that plays the comedic role. It's easily one of the worst books I've ever read, with a villain that was essentially just a spoiled rich kid who's got an AK-47 and a few sticks of dynamite. It's not the most menacing foe by a country mile. Again, this is SCOM, and the debut is called Terror in Turin, and it's in our Hall of Shame on the blog for a reason. Next, in 1981, Gold Eagle took over Don Pendleton's The Executioner series and changed the format to Mac Bolan working for the U.S. government as an operative cracking down on international crime. This event kickstarted what I would call the prime era for team-based combat. Due to Bolan's large number of allies, Gold Eagle developed two wildly successful series titles featuring teams that work in close conjunction with Bolan and the Stony Man headquarters in Northern Virginia. In 1982, both Phoenix Force and Able Team were launched. Phoenix Force ran 58 total novels from 1982 through 1992 and featured a five-man team consisting of McCarter, who's the British commando, Manning, who's a Canadian explosives expert, Inciso, Cuban-American expert on underwater warfare, Yakov Katz is a French-Israeli soldier, and then there's Kilo, who's a Japanese martial arts expert. I recently read and reviewed the first Phoenix Force novel called Argentine Deadline.
5 extraordinary men bonded in secrecy to avenge the acts of terrorists everywhere.
The debut book was really good and featured the team in Argentina rescuing hostages from a terrorist group. The series would be written under a revolving door of authors using the name Gar Wilson. As good as this first Phoenix Force book was, the same couldn't be said for the debut Able Team novel. Now, Able Team was launched in 1982 and ran 51 total novels under the name Dick Stivers, again using just a myriad of authors. The team consists of Bolan's allies in Carl Lyons, who's a former L.A. police sergeant, Herman Gadgets Schwartz, who's an electronics expert, and Rosario Pol Blancalis, who's just really a good mediator. The first novel is called Tower of Terror.
High above Manhattan, a crack paramilitary team races to neutralize a deadly terrorist attack.
I thought this was a terrible debut. The trio of heroes attempts to stop this Puerto Rican terrorist group that have hijacked this New York City skyscraper. The team just drives around New York, interviewing people, and Gadget spends a lot of time trying to do stuff with radios. I wanted some action, and I wanted this narrative to be action-packed, where the heroes would, ascend the floors and wipe out the bad guys. Thankfully, the series' second title, which was called The Hostage Island, was much, much better. I reviewed it on the blog, and we talked about it on the show. Once Able Team and Phoenix Force hit the shelves, the publishers really started committing to these team-based combat series titles. Eventually, in 1993, both Able Team and Phoenix Force end their individual runs and get lumped together as a new series title called Stony Man. This series features one complex team consisting of Mac Bolan and his vast network of allies. That series lasted up until 2015 with a whopping 140 installments. It's astounding. Also in 1982, there was a 6-book series of World War II action-adventure novels under the title Resistance, and it was published by Signet.
An American daredevil leads a multinational terror team to beat the Nazis at their killing game.
The idea is that a millionaire named Felix hires a soldier named Gideon to create a resistance force that will fight the Nazis. Each member of the team features a specific skill like knives, maps, boats, bombs. The author's name is listed as Gregory St. Germain, but I don't think anyone knows who this guy is. I'm not sure if this is a pseudonym or a real dude. I mostly liked the debut, but I found it to be a lot of repetition, with the teams constantly fighting the same battles over and over and over. Again, this is Resistance by a guy named Gregory St. Germain, and it was published by Signet. Now, one of the most popular team combat series of the 1980s was SOBs, which actually stands for Soldiers of Barabbas, or Sons of Barabbas, as they mentioned in the first novel. This series was published by Gold Eagle from 1983 through 1989 with a total of 33 books. Now, the name on the cover is Jack Hyld, but this was really a conglomerate team effort from a variety of authors. Mostly the series was written by Robin Hardy, but the first novel is Robin Hardy, David Wade, and Nick Carter Killmaster veteran Jack Cannon. The team is led by Barabbas, who's a special forces guy. It's sticking to the formula. The team is made up of experts that range from driver to pilot to explosives to medic to heavy guns and so forth. What's interesting about this team is that it's really large. In the first novel, there's 12 team members, and each of them are recruited in the series debut, The Barabbas Run. In that novel, Barabbas is located in a terrorist prison camp, and a CIA guy named Jessup shows up to offer him a deal. The U.S. government can get him out of his incarcerated hell in exchange for Barabbas working for a shadowy senator to do clandestine work all over the world. He's going to be paid well, he's supplied with all the firepower and intel he needs, and he has complete control of picking his own team. Thus, SOBs are born. I really, really enjoyed the first book, and I've got it reviewed on the blog, and I hope to read more of the series, but look for my review of more of those books in the coming weeks.
Let me do one. So The Rat Bastards was a 16-book run of World War II action-adventure novels. It was written by Len Levinson under the house name of John Mackey, which is one of his 22 pseudonyms. And it follows his first and very similar series, The Sergeant, where The Sergeant was set in Europe during World War II. The Rat Bastards happens in the South Pacific. Now, the debut novel is Hit the Beach, and it was published in 1983 with the following tagline. You can't kill 'em, and you can't take 'em alive. The Rat Bastards. Now, everyone says that this is Len's best series, and I've only read a couple of them. Members of the team come from every corner of America, and they fight with each other quite a bit. However, as they move through every significant battle in the war's Pacific theater, they prove to be brutally efficient at killing Japanese in close quarters, hand-to-hand combat. The books remain available under Len Levinson's name, and again, the name of the series is The Rat Bastards.
All right, so next is Bantam published a 6-book series called Denison's War between 1984 and 1986. It was written by Stephen Krauser under the name Adam Lassiter. The idea behind the series is that Denison, an ex-military operative and a Vietnam vet, works with the CIA by leading his team of 6 hardened warriors into global perilous assignments stopping the bad guys. I read the 4th installment, which was called King of the Mountain, and I found that the best part of the series is probably the artwork by Bob Larkin. I'll probably try another series installment at some time, but I'm not expecting anything monumental from this series. From 1984 through 1987, Dell published a series called The Black Berets. It was authored by John Preston and Michael McDowell under the house name Mike McRae. The team is made up of a savvy team of Vietnam vets led by Native American Billy Beak Beaker. Again, the team is made up of specialists that are reunited to work for a sketchy ex-boss named Parker. I reviewed the first book, and Tom, you've got that one in the stack too, right?
Oh, yeah. They learned their lethal skills on the secret battlefield of Vietnam. Once they start fighting for themselves, not even the government can stop them.
I reviewed this one on the blog as well and talked about it on the show. I loved the series debut, which is called Deadly Reunion. What I like about this team is that the authors aren't afraid to make them vulnerable. They each suffer from some sort of PTSD or addictions that makes the books possess this really gritty realism, which I like. It's a unique asset to what is otherwise a mercenary series. Pinnacle began publishing a 4-book series called The Force in 1984. The author was Jake Decker, and I can't make heads or tails if this was a pseudonym or if Jake Decker was the author's real name.
A two-fisted trio of troubleshooters who rush in where conventional law enforcement agencies fear to tread.
This team consists of Sinclair, a grizzled Vietnam vet that plays the team leader, a guy named Micah who's got mental powers that can implant ideas into the minds of others, and Jezebel, a female martial artist. The trio works for a government agency led by someone called the Librarian, and the Librarian sends them on all these international missions. I've never read the series, but I own the first 3 installments, and I'm going to eventually crack them open. Perhaps my favorite men's action-adventure series is Stephen Mertz's MIA Hunter. It ran 18 total installments and was published by Jove from 1985 through 1991. There was one additional novel released in 2014 called Hostage Town. And there's also an unnumbered installment that's just called Stone. The series stars Mark Stone, Hogg Wiley, and Terrence McLaughlin as a trio of rugged Vietnam veterans that basically do two things over the course of the series. In the early series entries, the trio mostly sticks to Southeast Asia and rescues prisoners of war from their jungle hell. This is important to Stone because he was a prisoner of war himself. He has a lot of skin in the game and knows how important it is to rescue these captured Americans. Typically, he gets leads from family members, and he's always at odds with the U.S. government, who refuse to admit there are Americans still being held as prisoners after the Vietnam War. The government wants Stone to stop the missions and to avoid any political snafus with the Vietnamese government. But by book number 8, Escape from Nicaragua, Stone and his team are now working closely with the CIA and the FBI to rescue political allies and various targets both in the U.S. and abroad. Now, this whole series is written under the house name Jack Buchanan, but this was really a series of authors that worked off of drafts, ideas, and outlines from series creator Stephen Mertz. These authors range from Joe Lansdale to Bill Kreider to William Fieldhouse to Mike Newton and to Stephen Mertz himself. Again, this is probably my favorite series, and thankfully, all of the books have been reprinted by our good friends at Wolfpack Publishing at an affordable price. Along with MIA Hunter, Jove also published another team combat series called The Hardcore. It was written under the name Chuck Bainbridge. In reality, this was mostly, I'll say mostly, William Fieldhouse, with Chris Lauder writing a few of the later installments. Fans may recognize the name Chris Lauder from the very first Deathlands novel. He wrote half that book, and then it got turned over to, I can't even think of his name now. The series ran from 1986 through 1989, encompassing a total of 8 books.
They're lethal, they're the best, and they're for hire.
You sounded just like our Night Stalker guy. Like Tom said, the Hardcore are for hire. This is a straight-up mercenary team that performs missions for money, cold, hard cash. In the opening pages of the series debut, which is simply called The Hardcore, the team is rescuing a couple from a Mexican terrorist group for a cool $1 million. The team is led by William O'Neill, who's a former Green Beret captain, and it's made up of Wentworth, who's a master of martial arts, Finelli, the obligatory demolition expert, Kane, who's a sort of like a silent assassin guy, works with crossbow and blades, and then there's McShane, who's the sergeant, mechanic, accountant, weapons buyer. He's sort of the meat and potatoes of the team. This group also has a compound in the Pacific Northwest, and Tom, they are probably the most organized, intelligent team of the 1980s. These guys are all about efficiency, execution, and making serious dough. I read the first novel. It's reviewed on the blog, and man, I absolutely loved it.
Okay, cool. Let me do one. Jove also published a series called The Guardians. It began in 1985 and ran for a total of 16 installments through 1991. Now, the Guardian series was written under the house name of Richard Austin, but my research says that the actual author was a libertarian science fiction writer named Victor Milan, who lived from 1954 to 2018. He also wrote the Donovan Steele series under the name S.L. Hunter. It's a very mid-1980s series when all of America was just metaphysically certain that a nuclear war with the Soviet Union was imminent. So World War III happens in the books, and the U.S. government launches Project Guardian, a 4-man elite survival team with great combat skills, advanced weaponry, and transport. Their assignment in the first book is to transport the U.S. president out of Washington, D.C., and across thousands of miles of post-apocalyptic chaos in a nuked-out American wasteland to get the president to a shelter in the Midwest for safety. Now, I read this book in 1987 when I was 17 years old, and so I recall liking it okay, but not enough to read book number 2, which should probably tell you something about the quality of the series. Now, there was a spin-off series tracking a 5-person multinational team in Europe called The Marauders by Michael McGann that went on for 4 or 5 books. I think McGann was actually author Ed Naha, who wrote some of the later installments in the Traveler series by D.B. Drum. Anyway, so that's The Guardians and The Marauders. I can only say that if they were amazing books, there'd probably be more of a buzz about them in kind of our paperback circles, but hardly anyone ever talks about these books, and the online reviews that I read are pretty lukewarm.
In 1987, Avon began publishing a series called Seals. It lasted 15 total books from 1987 through 1989. The name on the cover is Steve McKenzie, but this was really author Kevin Randall. Randall wrote Wings Over Nam, and he wrote a ton of science fiction novels. In fact, I just bought 3 of his science fiction books. He's also deemed the country's best expert on real-life alien abduction. Imagine that. I haven't had a chance to read any of these Seals books, but they sound right up my alley.
The world's most ruthless fighting unit, taking the art of warfare to the limit and beyond.
I thought you were going to do a Buzz Lightyear thing there.
I haven't. My voices are all over the place this week.
All right. From what I can gather, this series is about 4 Navy SEALs that are serving in the Vietnam War. Each book is simply one word, like breakout or ambush or rescue. I'm sure I'll get to reading 1 or 2 of these at some point. I've got a bunch of them. Leisure published a team-based action-adventure series called ZCOM from 1988 through 1990. This was a 4-book series authored by David Alexander using the name Kyle Manning. This is the David Alexander that wrote the abysmal Phoenix series.
Oh, boy.
Not the David Alexander that wrote the crime noir novels. In other words, this is the really crappy, untalented David Alexander.
Ooh, you're going to get some feedback on that. People like that.
I know. I've never read ZCOM, but apparently the team is made up of 5 members with names like Cage, Prophet, Macbeth, Domino, and Zabriskie. Basically, this is a commando unit that does odd jobs internationally for, you guessed it, the U.S. government. Again, I've never read it, and I don't have any real motivation, considering Alexander wrote it. The guy's a literary abomination, and I'll leave him alone at that. In 1989, Leisure published the first of 2 books called The Tunnel Rats, and I think you read those.
Yeah, it was authored by Stephen Mertz, writing as Cliff Banks. The heroes are a 3-man squad who are selected for their general fighting ability, along with Viet Cong defector who trains them and accompanies them on assignments. I read both the books, and the tagline was, "An underground VC fortress, 4 brave American soldiers, a battle in the heart of hell." Like I mentioned, the series is written by Mertz, who's a Mac Bolan alumnus and also the creator of that MIA Hunter series he talked about. It's a Vietnam War team-based series, but it only lasted 2 books, but they were both really good. Now, like a lot of authors did, Mertz wrote the outline to the first book and then subcontracted the actual writing of it to Bill Kreider, who was the ghostwriter of the book's first draft, I guess you could say. During the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese dug underground tunnels to navigate, plan, and attack U.S. forces. The concept of the Tunnel Rats is that they were a team of American soldiers who were comfortable digging into and fighting inside these claustrophobic tunnels. Really exciting books. I'm kind of bummed out that there were only 2 of them. Again, the series is Tunnel Rats by Cliff Banks.
Tom, are those ever reissued?
No, unfortunately. I've kind of bugged Mertz about him because I don't know if he owns the rights to them or not. And he's been pretty forward-leaning about releasing his back catalog as ebooks. And Wolfpack Publishing has been reprinting a bunch of his old stuff as well. For some reason, Tunnel Rats has not made that shortlist. So I wonder if there's something contractually that's not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, it must be. Well, Lynx Books published the 3-book series called 5 Force in 1989. This was written by Jeff Roven, who's written hundreds and hundreds of books. He's written as Ralph Compton, as well as Tom Clancy. Roven is also a big movie guy. He wrote a ton of novel adaptations of films, and he also wrote books with William Shatner and Gillian Anderson, who played...
he gets around.
He gets around. And I had the hots for Gillian Anderson.
A good-looking lady.
Scully from X-Files.
Absolutely.
But Force 5, Tom, what's the cover tell us?
A new series of action adventures with the kill or be killed commandos who got World War II off to a running start.
I've got no experience with this series, but it's obviously set in World War II. The team is made up of Ogun, the ramrod Englishman, Livingston, a rugged seat-of-the-pants Yank, Weers, the brawny South African, and Lambert, the French prowler, And there's also a guy named Cologne, which is the Italian with quick fist. The 3-book titles are Destination Algiers, Destination Stalingrad, and Destination Norway. Now, Berkeley published a 6-book series called Command and Control from 1989 to 1992. The author was James D. Mitchell, who was a former Green Beret sergeant in Vietnam.
Their tour, Vietnam, Green Beret. Their motto, we kill for peace.
I haven't read this series, but the team seems to be led by Green Beret Sergeant Brett Yancey, and that's about all I know of the series. I've got a couple of these books. My issue is they're really thick. They're like 250 to 300 pages, and with our production schedule, I can't fit it in.
That's a non-starter for me.
It really is. Well, Dan Schmidt, he's a guy I really want to do a feature on, but I just don't know enough about his life. If anybody has any information on Dan Schmidt, I've been trying to find his family for years, but I can't find anything. If you have any tips, tell us. But author Dan Schmidt had tremendous success as an executioner and a Super Bowl regular. He also authored a few of his own series titles, including Eagle Force. The Eagle Force series lasted 9 total installments and was published by Bantam beginning in 1989. I've read a lot of the series, and I really, really like it. In the debut, which is called Contract for Slaughter, a former CIA operative named Gabriel is introduced. Gabriel worked with his father in clandestine operations in Vietnam and Laos. His father was mysteriously killed in action, and at the beginning of the novel, Gabriel is retired and he's fishing in Florida. But he's approached by a man who wants Gabriel to help rescue his daughter from the clutches of an Islamic terrorist group called the Sword of Islam. Gabriel then recruits his old Vietnam crew to form a mercenary group called Eagle Force. The team consists of Dillinger, who specializes in knives and has 2 Colt 45s, Sims, the African-American martial artist, and a Dutch tough guy named Boulawark, whose specialty is a crossbow. At the end of the first novel, Gabriel uses the money that the client pays him for rescuing the daughter to fund a full operation where Eagle Force will perform more dangerous killing jobs for cash. The great thing about the series is that there's this really compelling through story that runs through the first 5 or 6 novels that involves a former CIA badass named Saunders who's out to kill Gabriel. The mystery that unfolds is how Saunders was involved with Gabriel's father. And there's clues in each book that's eventually wrapped up in the series installment called Ring of Fire. Now, before Schmidt launched Eagle Force, he had a similar idea with his title Kill Squad. This was a series published by Avon that ran a total of 9 installments, and it debuted in 1986 with the book Counterattack.
Introducing the World's Strike Force, America's most lethal killing machine, the last hope of the free world.
That was Ralph Hayes. Like the later Eagle Force, the series stars John Smith as a former paramilitary operative in Central and South America that's also a Special Forces sniper and a 5th-degree black belt. He's asked by the CIA to form the World Strike Force to run clandestine missions all over the globe fighting terrorists. The team is Williams, who's a former bank robber. There's Schnell, a German big guy and a racist. There's White, who is a former KKK hitman. Barnes, who is a hitman from Harlem. He's black. Walker, who's a former boxing champ. And Jackson, a tough guy fisherman from Florida. I don't really know how he fits
Some strange bedfellows there.
Well, as you can imagine, what's really interesting about this team is they're at odds with each other right off the bat.
Yeah, you have like the racist and the black militant.
It's crazy. But it's also one of the only 80s combat teams that I can recall that doesn't feature one single Vietnam War vet. This debut novel has the whole recruitment angle running while presenting the team's first mission, which is penetrating a Syrian terrorist compound. I liked this debut novel and found that the internal conflicts within the team was just as enjoyable as the onslaught that they bring to the terrorist, but I didn't have as much luck with the series' second novel, Mission Revenge. But I do want to try more of the series. I've got a few more of those books on my shelf. From 1989 through 1991, Berkeley released a 6-book series of team-based science fiction novels under the name Keith William Andrews. but these were actually written by brothers William Keith and J. Andrew Keith.
An elite force of commandos fights the battles of the past to save America's future.
In all reality, this is mostly just another team-based combat series. The idea is that the Soviets won the Cold War and thus took command of Europe and most of the free world. What's left for the Soviets to conquer is in the U.S. with pockets of resistance in rural places in the West and Pacific Northwest. In Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a special forces team calling themselves Freedom's Rangers, utilizes a top-secret time travel base to go through time to stop the Soviet Union's eventual path to dominance. But, here's the kicker, the Soviets have a time travel device too, so the two warring factions battle each other through time. I read the second novel, and man, I thought it was really good. That novel was set during the Revolutionary War and featured a grand battle between patriots and the bloody British. But also thrown into the battle are machine gun-wielding U.S. patriots and Soviet Union enemy soldiers squaring off at the same time. I recently acquired the series debut, and I hope to read it soon and get a better understanding of what the events were that led to this time travel adventure. But again, it's like 300 pages, and I just don't have time for it. Next, we've got a new decade, 1990, and it kicks off with Special Forces Command. This was a 6-volume series authored by a guy named James N. Pruitt and published by Berkeley. Now, Pruitt was a former U.S. Army Green Beret Master Sergeant, and he won 5 Purple Hearts and 2 Silver Stars in the Vietnam War. So he's a real deal.
Yep.
Pruitt also wrote a series of action-adventure novels set on the NASCAR racing circuit. I read the first Special Forces Command novel, and Tom, you've got it.
They're the best of the U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force. A combat-ready, multi-mayhem fighting force.
Go, Joe! All right, and backstory readers learn that B.J. Matson and Jacob Mortimer are hardened military lifers that are directed by a general named Johnson to create this really diverse superstar team that can analyze, lead, and execute international missions for the U.S. military. They create a team and then take on the first mission to kill off a Cuban terrorist cell. I think this series, which is often just called SOCOM, it's more of a tech thriller with a lot of focus on briefings, meetings, and the planning and execution of missions. It's the opposite of the typical slam bam, thank you ma'am sort of action series like, say Kill Squad or Alpha Team or something like that. I think I like that aspect, and you might like it as well. In 1991, Gold Eagle began publishing the 4-book series called Hatchet. The house name was Knox Gordon, but this was really author Michael Kasner. The team is led by Captain Mike Reese, and according to Paul Bishop's excellent blog, the team is specially trained and equipped for cross-border missions that are too dangerous for normal channels. In the air and on the ground, behind the desk and in the jungles, Hatchet is the most action-packed series of the Vietnam War. I had these when I was a kid, but I never read them. Tom, have you ever read any of these Hatchet novels?
I had one. I think I traded it away without reading it.
Yeah. I've got one more that I just recently read. I think I reviewed on the blog. It's called The Protectors. It was a 2-book series written under the name Zachary Blue, but it was actually written by R.L. Stein, of all people. And it was a team
The Goosebumps guy.
Yeah, the Goosebumps guy.
Interesting.
It's got I think 5 kids that are drafted out of high school to form a team and basically travel the globe and fight crime. But it only lasted, like I said, 2 books. But I read it and it was okay, but nothing I'd write home about.
All right. I got one real quick one. The Easy Company series of adult westerns, real good. I think the author, they was written under the pseudonym of John Harding. A lot of different guys wrote them. Eric, looking at the time, we should probably just wrap this up, man. Thank you for pulling this episode together, man. This was truly a Herculean effort you put into this, and so thank you on behalf of the listener. Can I talk us out?
Yeah, go ahead.
With that being said, let's bring this extended episode of the Paperback Warrior podcast to an end, and we'll let the people get to work, the gym or the clubhouse to tee off. Follow Paperback Warrior on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also email feedback to us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. Come back next week for an exciting episode. On behalf of Eric, this is Tom saying, be cool.